ora. Tēnei te mihi ki te atua, te kingi o ngā kingi, te ariki o ngā ariki, te rangatira o ngā rangatira. No reira i te atua, tēnā koe, tēnā koe, tēnā koe. Tēnā koutou ki a tātou tini mate, haere atu ki te kaiti ako o te pō. Haere, haere, haere. Āpiti hono, tātai hono, te hunga mate ki te hunga mate. Āpiti hono, tātai hono, te hunga ora ki te hunga. E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā manuhiri o ngā haue whā, nau mai, haere mai, whakatau mai. E ngā tangata no mōna nui a kiwa, alofa lava, malo i lelei, whakaluku lawhi atu, nisa bula ki a rana. E ngā hoa mahi o te whānau Amotai, tēnā koutou, huri no tā tātou whare, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Kia ora te whānau. Welcome to the first in the series of seminars. Before we kick off with some content, I'll do a karakia for us. He waka eke no ki te rangi, he mōna eke no ki te whenua, nau mai rā te hau, nau mai rā te kōhinga whetū, nau mai rā ngā Amotai, haumi e, hui e, tai e. Now, I'm going to explain this karakia a little bit for those of us joining from our Amotai suppliers. Our tipuna, our Pacifica tipuna and our Māori tipuna used to cruise around the Pacific from, some Rarotonga to Samoa to Aotearoa and back, like my wife goes to Kmart and Pack and Save on the weekend. And they used to cruise around the Pacific and they used observations of the natural world to get them to where they were going so they wouldn't die. And they used observations of wind patterns, no mai rā te hau. They invented navigations by the stars and using your brain to memorize navigation by the stars, and no need for a star chart or a sextant. No mai rā te kōhinga whetū, collection of stars or constellations. And they used knowledge of swells and ocean currents to help get them where they were going. No mai rā ngā Amotai. Now, an Amotai is a swell or a current that you could use as a navigator to take you where you're going. So that's how we came up, that's why Amotai is named Amotai. You may have heard this kōrero before. It is because we would like to be in a position of supporting our suppliers, the navigators, and helping a current or swell that helps take them where they're going. Hence that karakia, and hence Amotai is the name of our organisation. Now, before I get into more of the content, I will talk a little bit about the series itself, the overview. Now, funding for this series was provided by Activate Tāmaki Makaurau. It is an Auckland Unlimited program, and it was based on support for Auckland businesses. Because of all the lockdowns Auckland businesses were having a hard time, so they put this program in place to support Auckland businesses. And we said, cool, we'll run a series of webinars, but why not grab our whānau from around the country and they can jump in as well. I mean, it costs us nothing to have people from Invercargill here or Oamaru. So we thought, why don't we just grab people from around the country and we'll support everyone equally using these webinars. So to that end, we'll be running one of these every week at this time for this week and then 4 more weeks. So next week we'll have tenders and proposals, same day, same time. That's seminar 2. Then something about presentations and communications. That's seminar 3. Pricing for profit, seminar 4, and health and safety, seminar 5. So what I did was also put the. Can we mute ourselves, please, if you're not already muted? Cool. So what I did was put the links to the other webinars on every event page for the webinar. So for example, you came to an Eventbrite page for this one. On that page, further down the page, is links to the other 4 webinars. And you have to sign up to each one individually. That's just how Eventbrite works. You couldn't sign up to all of them at once. So that's why I put the other links to the other Eventbrite pages on the bottom of that page. But all of the pages are like that. So no matter where you come in, if you jumped on to, say, the 3rd one, the links to the other 4 are on the 3rd one. So they're on all of them. So if you're looking at those topics and thinking, yep, I'd like to get into a bit of tenders and proposals next week, you'll be able to find the link on any of the event pages, register for next week's seminar, and then join next week's seminar. So that's the same with all the topics there. Now we will be having some in-person events for Auckland. For people from around the more too, all you really need to know is you can jump on those topics online at your leisure. Now, I'm going to give you a very brief overview of supplier diversity in general. I'm talking about 30 seconds with, and then I'll give you an update on the latest in what's happening when it comes to supplier diversity and buyers and that kind of stuff in Aotearoa. Now, some of you may have heard this kōrero before, but some may be seeing it for the first time. So supplier diversity is an international movement. It's been going in the States for decades and in Australia for at least 10 years. And New Zealand has finally caught on. We're a little bit behind the other guys, but we are not. We're doing the mahi now. It is an economic development piece, and Auckland Council started supplier diversity in Aotearoa. And that might sound a little bit weird, and you might be wondering why that's happening, particularly if you're not from Auckland. The council said, well, you know, between Auckland Council, Auckland Transport, which is a council organisation, and Watercare, we spend about $3 billion a year. You know, why don't we find a way to make sure that the impact of that expenditure creates targeted economic development, that it has more of an impact on our community than just getting a water pipe put together, just getting a road built. You know, why don't we do more with it than that? And the answer to that is supply diversity. So the social innovation arm of Auckland Council started supply diversity as a way of boosting the economies of Māori and Pacifico economies of Auckland. And then that became Amotai, and then Amotai spread throughout the country. So Auckland Council was probably the first organisation to put a target in place, and they said we'll make sure that 5% of our expenditure goes to diverse suppliers. Not long behind came central government, and central government said, yeah, we'll do the same thing. We'll make sure that our expenditure goes to diverse suppliers. And then ever since, Amotai has been working to get other local bodies on board, other local councils, and have also been working behind the scenes to get government agencies on board. So we're working with people like MB and TPK, and we're saying to central government, cool, let's action this target that you've put in place. Let's talk to all of your mandated agencies and let's see if we can get the mahi going. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the role of private companies. So I'd like you to think about how many roads Waka Kotahi builds. So Waka Kotahi, New Zealand's national transport agency, they build the sum total of 0 roads every year. They don't build any roads. What they do is they go to someone like Fulton Hogan and say, hey, we want to stick a road here. And Fulton Hogan goes, sure, that's $100 million, thank you. So private companies do a very large chunk of the actual doing on behalf of government agencies. So Amotai is talking to government agencies from a couple of different angles. They're saying to them, sure, by all means, if you give Fulton Hogan $100 million to build this road, how are you going to make sure that they spend a chunk of it with Amotai businesses? And can we hold their feet to the fire in some way? Can we put it into their contracts if we need to deal with Amotai businesses in some way? And we're talking to them from that angle. And we're also talking to them from the angle of Well, sure, there's, in addition to that, there's also expenditure that you have, like you spend money on, I don't know, fixing your lights or coffee machines and water coolers and cleaners and that kind of stuff. Do you get photography done? Do you have design work done? What about that stuff? So we talk to them from those angles and trying to get them, encourage them, or make the path smoother for them to spend money with Amotai businesses from both those angles. Now, when the council put their Auckland Council put their target in place of 5%, and then the government followed on behind. I mean, obviously, the government obviously spends way more money than Auckland Council. Central government followed on behind, and then you have these local bodies around the country coming on board and putting targets in place. When that happened, a lot of people think, yes, job done. 5%, too easy, problem solved. We're in, right? Because the road to success must be just super easy now. And you get a contract, and you get a contract, and you get a contract. Well, meanwhile, in real life, the road to success looks like this. There is a ton of complexity when it comes to dealing with government agencies and their primes, the guys, the large companies they deal with. There's a ton of complexity involved. Otherwise, you wouldn't need us. Would there be no need for someone to help connect the two pieces if the road to success was simple and easy and not complex? So I talked about Auckland Council, right, and obviously in central government. Here are the layers of complexity, and these are the stuff. This is the stuff we're dealing with all day, every day. So in the perfect storm, supplier diversity would be really, really well known, and the movement as a whole would be widespread. In Auckland Council, they have 10,000 staff. And we're meeting parts of Auckland Council that we haven't met before, like their property services group. So again, this is our own organization. They started the movement. There's not a lack of enthusiasm, but there would be, just to hazard a guess, maybe 1,000 contact points we'd need to make before we'd spoken to everybody within our own organization once and told them the story about, hey, there's a supplier diversity thing going on. Do you want in? So you multiply that by, 130, 140 government agencies, multiplied by their prime private organizations, meaning the organizations that do the big work for them. So again, the Fulton Hogan, the Downer, the Dempsey Wood, that kind of stuff. You multiply that by all those people, and there may be 10 to 15,000 contact points we'd need to have before we'd spoken to everybody once and said, hey, there's a supplier diversity thing going on. Do you want to be in? So the point I'm making is that it is incredibly complex, but there is something that you can do, and this is why we're pointing it out to our whānau now, our suppliers now. There's something you can do to help. So we're doing this all day, every day. We're creating the contact points. We're trying to talk to as many people as we can, trying to tell them the story and bring them on the tune. Our suppliers are also doing that, but we'd like to encourage you to do as much as is humanly possible. So our suppliers should be talking to all and sundry, telling them about supplier diversity and the benefits of it and how they're involved, including stuff like just have our badge on your email signature that talks about Amotai and that you're a member. Another piece to the perfect storm, that there are relationships formed between suppliers and decision makers. Now, I'd like to draw your attention to two values that I use when I'm doing this mahi and when often our crew is doing this mahi. And so that's whakawhanaungatanga and manakitanga. So whakawhanaungatanga is actual relationship building. And manakitanga, it's often expressed as hosting guests, but there's a deeper or a broader philosophy at play. So in terms of manakitanga, what you're doing is you're thinking about the other person's needs in advance. What does this person I'm dealing with What do they need? What do they like? And in a business sense, what are their values? What are their ways of doing things? What is their timeframes? And how can I support them in that? Now, the nature of manakitanga is that that's reciprocal, and that you're looking after, thinking about their values, their timeframes, their needs, and trying to support that. And hopefully, if it's a real relationship, there'll be reciprocity. And the person on the other side of the table will be thinking about your values and your needs and your timeframes and your to-do list and trying to get stuff done, trying to help you get stuff done. So that's why, again, that adds a layer of complexity. Even if people have that mindset, it also, if you think about it, extra complexity is that there's relationships between our suppliers and not just decision makers, but the right decision makers. In a large organization, you might be doing, say, temporary fencing, and there could be 50 decision makers inside that organization, and only one of them deals with temporary fencing. So that's what I mean, that you need to have a relationship with the right decision maker. So again, this is all adding complexity. So I'd like to tie it back to things that our suppliers can do to make things easier on ourselves. And that would be make sure that anytime you're dealing with buyers, you're being quite focused and making sure that you're dealing with, tracking down the right person. And also that you have that mindset of manakitanga, where you're trying to think about in advance the person you're dealing with, what their needs are, what their ways of operating, and how you can fit into that. Another part to the perfect storm, it's clear to both parties what work is coming up, and it's discussed in advance. Later on, I'm going to talk about GETS, what it is, what it does, and how you can use it. And I'll reiterate the point I'm about to make now. If something pops up on GETS and you don't know the client, you don't know the job, and you haven't spoken to the client about it in advance, there could be a complete waste of your time going through that RFP or that tender off GETS. The reason why that is because if they haven't spoken to you, I bet you they have spoken to somebody else. Meaning they're talking to their relationships about the work they have coming up all the time, and then they put it out to the public, and then everybody who they already have spoken to about it goes for that tender, and then everyone who haven't spoken to also goes for that tender. But obviously only those that they have a relationship and have conversations with are really in the game. So next part of the perfect storm, buyers get to know the capacity and capability of suppliers. So in the third session, we'll talk a little bit about how to present and how to be convincing, how to influence the way that people see you. It's an important part, that you know a lot about what you do, and then you can tell other people, i.e. buyers, about what you do in a really effective way. So the third session talks about presentations and talking to people and influencing the way that people see you. Another piece to the perfect storm, suppliers are available when the work is available. So sometimes we get buyers pop up out of the blue and go, hey, we got this thing and the tender's due next week. And you're like, what? That's a non-opportunity, man. Can you not? And we actively discourage them from doing that, and we actively encourage them to go, hey, we've got this job coming in 3 months' time. Can we start talking about it now, and can we start talking to your suppliers now? So that's obviously a way better way of doing things, and we're trying to encourage that as much as possible. But by the same token, getting to know a buyer, having a relationship with them, allows you to have those discussions and foreshadow when things are coming up, so that missed opportunities aren't based on timing. Oh man, we would have loved to work with you, but we got that job on. That's one of the most frustrating parts around missed opportunities, is the timing of things, that they would have used, a certain supplier, but they were busy at the time, and sometimes people are super busy. And the last part of the perfect storm, Suppliers can fit into buyers' operating methods. And with large organizations, sometimes they have a whole procurement team, and their job is to bring you on board and open an account and induct you into their organization. It's also true that particularly in construction, having the right paperwork, the right health and safety quals is important. So that's sometimes where a missed opportunity occurs. Now, in the last session, session 5, we have health and safety as a topic, and we'll have someone come along who can help you work through the issues around health and safety paperwork. And also we're bringing in Tōtika to come and talk about how that works, and that might be a solution for you guys. But that's the perfect storm. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about how you could navigate engaging with buyers. I will also say that we spend all day, every day, thinking about ways that we can make this smoother, trying to notice what does and doesn't work and trying to refine our methods. If you have some, I'd like you to kind of in the background, I'd like you to have a think about things you've seen that work and things you've seen that don't work, and we could have a little chat and tease that out a little bit. I'll tell you when that comes, but have a think about that in the back of your mind now. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about this kind of stuff. Have a strategic plan is probably a 3-hour workshop in and of itself. So I'm just going to say you got to have one. I have noticed I've been working with businesses since 2006. Would have seen 350 business, probably up to about 400 now in that time. And it is very, very common for particularly the smaller businesses to just not have the time to do the planning and the development of the business. And they often get stuck in a position where we could totally grow the business if only we could stop and take time to put those pieces in place. All I can do is to encourage you to, one, notice if you're in that position. If I said to you, hey, I'm running this workshop and it's going to be all day next Thursday, would you be able to make time to make that happen? If the answer is no, you're probably in that trap. If you had real difficulty getting to this thing, signing up for and turning up to this thing, you're probably in that trap, and that you don't have the time to grow the business, but you can't grow the business because you don't have the time, the whole catch-22. So again, I just would like to encourage you to think about whether you have time to grow the business, to work on the business. And if you don't, how are you going to go about doing that? How are you going to go about putting plans in place? I'll talk about support last, and that might help. Be clear on how supplier diversity fits into your overall plans. So my kōrero on this one is, so being an Amotai member should be one of a dozen boxes you tick. I've seen our supplier list, and we have some of the best businesses in New Zealand. And that's not just because I've got a, I'm biased. I think there is a bias there on my part, that I think we're awesome. But by the same token, we literally have some of the best businesses in their categories in the country as Amotai suppliers. I won't name names, but I'm thinking about, they'll be whakamā if I do. But I'm thinking in particular about a few that I rattle off the top of my head that are just at the top of their game. So when it comes to being an Amotai member, and when it comes to talking about your business in general, you should be talking mostly about all the other boxes you tick. Tons of experience, got the right equipment, got the right staff, got the right systems and processes, got this track record. That should be, 95% of your game. And we're an Amotai member is, that icing on the cake type thing. It needs to be self-sustaining in that way. If in your mind, 95% of your mahi is trying to, target the, the council or the government targets, then I think that's a mistake. Not that I'm not saying tons of people are doing that, I'm just pointing it out. Be clear on what kind of work you chase and what kind you will leave. This helps with matching. Now, I'll explain matching a little bit. When we first started, we targeted trying to get 20 buyers on board. And then within a year, we had 120. So, and with the government agencies coming on board, that could double over the next 18 months. And by the same token, we have other organizations who are thinking about becoming buyers. Now, when they come up with an opportunity, some of them, particularly the larger ones, come to us and say, look, I'm doing this job and I need, this, this, and this. We need these 4 categories of work. It's in this area and at this time. And then we'll go to the database and try and find as many companies as possible that fit that. So if your categories in the database are really close to what you do, then that's super helpful for matching. It's also true that some of the smaller buyers do this for themselves. Now, as you can imagine, they may not be as good at searching the database as we are, so you've got to help them out. There would be no point kind of ticking every box just in case, just ticking, we do this, we do that, we do this, we do that, just in case, because then you'll end up wasting your own time and everybody else's when people start to show interest in something you don't really do. So if it's 100% in your ballpark, 100% in your lane, then make sure your categories are clear, that you're using the right categories. If you kind of sort of do it, don't tick that box. You'll end up getting requests for stuff you don't actually do, and that ends up being a distraction. Now, use the database, update your profile, and use Amotai businesses as suppliers. I have seen profiles that are two sentences long, Whānau. Now, if that is you might want to think about that, because again, when we search the database, we kind of we grab people and don't necessarily, if they fit the category and the timing and that sort of stuff, we put them forward to a buyer, right? Whereas a buyer, particularly one that's searching for themselves, is going to go, well, who can I find? Cool, let's look at their profile. 2 sentences. It doesn't tell me much. How can I take this any further when you've got 2 sentences there? We build, so just have a little think about that. And that's only going to increase the number of buyers who aren't using us for matchmaking and are kind of just looking through the database, trying to find somebody. You have to stick out like a sore thumb. You have to stick out and be obvious. So the number of buyers is going to increase that are doing this for themselves. And the better your profile is, the more likely it is that they'll take things further. And use Amotai businesses as suppliers. We need to stick our money where our mouth is. When I put this series together, I used Amotai suppliers. And for some of the topics, I'd used non-Amotai suppliers in the past, a year and a half ago. And this time I was like, well, why can't it be all Amotai? There was another project I was working on where one of our suppliers wanted to go for a job, but they needed suppliers in a wide range of areas. And we said, well, why can't we start at 100% Amotai and work our way back from there? As opposed to, some of the other organizations go, well, why don't we use 10% Amotai? We'll promise to use 10% of this job with Amotai suppliers. Whereas our whakaaro was, why don't we start at 100%, and then if we can't find a supplier in an area in that category, then we'll go outside Amotai. I'd like to draw your attention to this thought here when it comes to connecting with buyers. So to line up our whakaaro for what's coming next. Know your client and know yourself, and you will not waste each other's time in 100 interactions. That's a Sun Tzu quote I've butchered for my purposes. The original quote was, attributed to Sun Tzu in The Art of War. Know your enemy and know yourself, and you won't face peril or danger in 100 battles. And the thought still holds when it comes to, say, dealing with businesses. Now, they're not your enemy, obviously, but knowing your client and knowing yourself is super important to creating good quality relationships. And not wasting each other's time. Now, connecting with buyers. We encourage you to use the database to do some research on buyers. If you wanted to work with a particular buyer, that would be his first starting point. The contact in the database is typically their supplier diversity lead. They're not the decision maker. Remember, I talked earlier about making sure you get to the decision maker. So the point of that would be to tell them what you're up to, figure out how they work, and then get yourself to the right person. You can, after doing some research on the buyer and having a good think about what they do, what you do, and how the two might intersect, talk to your local relationship manager, and they may be able to give you some insight. That's not always going to be the case. There was one example there where one of my suppliers wanted to connect with Kainga Ora. And I said, well, Kainga Ora builds no houses. Like I said earlier, Waka Kotahi doesn't build any roads. Kainga Ora builds 0 houses each year. They use other people to do that. You'd be better off talking to, say, Piritahi, and talking to them about this particular program that they're working on right now. Yeah, that's a much more focused, it's a way better expenditure of your time. Now, awesome, I could provide that provide that insight for my supplier at that time. And if my policy is, if I know, I'll tell you. If I don't, I'll say I don't know. So you could talk to your local relationship manager and try and get some ideas out of them. They may or may not have any insight for you, but it's always a great place to start. Think about what value you add and knowing your USP, and some of you would be familiar with that term, your unique selling proposition. So not only do you know what you're good at and how it adds value to the client, you also know how you do something differently or better than other people in the market. That's your uniqueness, your unique selling proposition. So knowing what to say is quite an important bit, but making it look nice and professional and sharp helps. So it's not the be all and end all of communicating with potential clients. You don't have to have the glossy brochure isn't the thing that convinces someone to go with you, but it is kind of the cherry on top in terms of comms. If you know them really well and you've built a good relationship, you know your capabilities really well, and you're going to explain it to them, and you've got good-looking comms, then you've got a perfect storm, so to speak. Then you've got way better than something you stuck together on the old word, Make it look good. Think clearly about what your key messages are. And the funny thing is, if someone ever asks you a question and you need a bit of thinking time to come up with an answer, go back to your key messages and go from there. I've done it in like radio interviews and stuff and TV interviews, and they ask you something and you need a bit of thinking time. So you go straight back to one of your key messages, start talking about it, and then formulate your answer. But yeah, being super clear about what your key messages are before you go into any interaction. Now, these last 2 points I'm going to cover was something that happened in my mahi a couple of weeks ago. So focus, mass emails, unfocused emails to buyers will diminish your brand. Don't go spamming people. Don't go spamming anyone. Personalize, be specific about who to talk to and the topic and what to talk to them about. Turning up out of the blue, not so crash hot. I had a colleague from EMA, Employers and Manufacturers Association, say, hey, look, we're running this series of seminars and we've got a one-on-one support program. It's to help Māori businesses in this instance with HR, human resources, and health and safety. And we've got 5 places left and we're trying to fill them up. Can you put it out to your peeps and see if we can fill these 5 spaces? I said, sure, happy to help. So don't quote me on this number, it's just an example. I sent out around 50 emails, emails to about 50 of our suppliers. And in it, I said, this isn't my program. This is an EMA program. Don't contact me about this, contact the EMA. So here's some maths for us. We've got 50 pānui. How many people do you think, how many of those 5 slots do you think we filled, given it went out to 50 people? I'm just going to pause there for a second. You don't have to tell me, just have a little think. 50 pānui, 5 slots for free help for HR and health and safety. The answer to that question is 1. We had 1 person contact the EMA and go, yep, I'd like one of those spots. Is that a 2% strike rate? 2% strike rate. So have a little think about that. Why is that happening? Why are you getting something, and you're not trying to take money from somebody, you're giving people stuff for free. So you're like, why would you get a 2% strike rate when you're giving people stuff? If you're like, hey, can I sell you the subscription to my magazine? Maybe, you get a lower strike rate. But when you're giving stuff for free, it's like, why do you get a 2% strike rate? So just have a little think about that. The reasons are, this email's come out of the blue. I've sent it to suppliers. They're trying to manage their own to-do list, their own inbox, their own mahi, right? Then I pop up out of the blue and go, hey, how about this thing? It's the out of the blue filter. They're running a filter on communications they're getting. Why is this fella from Auckland Council sending me this stuff? Delete. Bet you they didn't even read it. Bet you a big chunk of people just didn't read it. This unfamiliar name. We didn't have any prior discussion about this at all. I know nothing about this thing you're talking about. Delete. So that's the filter of out of the blue, out of context. For some of those people, it would have been completely irrelevant. If you didn't have staff, what do you need help with HR for? So some of them might have read it and gone, this is not relevant to me at all. So that's one of the filters, delete. Cool. Some of them may have read it and said, yes, this is relevant to me, but not right now. Yes, I do need some help with my HR or whatever it is. But right now I'm working with my accountant on our cash flow planning and our finance and our end of year tax and stuff. I'm definitely thinking about this in August. So that's the relevant but not timely filter. The other thing is, I had some people come back to me and go, hey, I'm interested. And I was like, what? I thought that might happen. That's why I put in bold, don't contact me about this. Contact the EMA. This is not my program. This is someone else's program. And I still had people coming. I had more people come to me than I did go to the EMA directly. And I'm like, why is that happening? Because I thought I was being super smart and putting instructions in bold not to talk to me about it. To go to EMA, it's their program. People are speed reading. People are speed reading their email. And it's not super clear what you want them to do next. Obviously, it was not clear enough what you want them to do next. So even if you get through all the filters, why is this coming to me out of the blue? Maybe it's not relevant. Maybe it's relevant but not timely. Get through all those filters, then it's still not super clear what you want people to do next, because they're speed reading. Now, I'm going to bring it back to our buyers and contacting buyers. If our suppliers are doing that when they're managing their own mahi, their own to-do list, their own inbox, guess what buyers are doing? They're doing the same thing. If we're trying to contact our buyers, we're trying to trying to talk to them, they're behaving in exactly the same way our suppliers are. They're running the same filters on communications they're receiving. They're running the, why has this come out of the blue? Filter. This just popped out of the blue. Who's this person? Why are they contacting me? Delete. They're running the, it's not relevant filter, meaning maybe they deal with temporary fencing and you're doing electrical. Delete. Not relevant. They're running the relevant, but not right now. Cool. Email about asphalt. Well, that part of the job doesn't come up for 6 months. I'll deal with that when that comes up. Delete. So they're running the same, buyers are running the same filters, and then it's not clear what you want me to do next. Buyers are running the same filters. So that's what I mean, that all this corridor that's gone before is to a certain extent trying to help you mitigate and deal with that issue. That buyers are trying to run their own to-do list, their own mahi, their own timeframes, their own inbox. And the way that we approach them can either be super helpful or super unhelpful, somewhere on that scale. This stuff is a little bit more general. Be present or visible. And by that we mean take advantage of any matchmaking meetings and events with buyers. We want you to network, turn up to networking meetings. I will put a little plug for Whāriki in here. Whāriki is one of our partners. We're partnering with Whāriki on this one, along with Auckland Unlimited. And Whāriki started in Auckland, and they're a Māori business network and spreading throughout the country. And they run networking events. So turning up to places and talking to people about what you do, always helpful. What I will also say about networking is a word of caution. Lots of people think networking is turn up to a meeting and try and hand your card out to as many people as possible so you can try and get work out of them. That's not the best way to go about networking. The best way to go about networking is turn up to a meeting and you meet somebody. You say, "Hey, what do you do?" "Oh, I'm such and such from a traffic management company." "Oh, awesome." And then you start chatting, and they say, "Oh, yeah, we're trying to work on our website right now, and we're trying to get it done, and you know, we need a good web designer." You go, "Well, actually, I know someone. There's old Frank over there. I'll go introduce you to him." That's way, way, way better networking. You introduce this company over here to somebody over there that they should have a conversation with. That's the most effective form of networking. Now, the reason why that's most effective is now both of those two people think you're awesome and you're at the front of their mind. Now, both of those people know what you do, and hopefully they'll reciprocate. So now when those two people are talking to someone, if they're running the same method, you now have two people who know what you do. And anytime someone mentions, you know, the category you're in, they go, "Oh, well, let me introduce you to Jared." And there you are. "Hi, come and chat with me." So that's my corridor networking. Although we'll cover that a little bit more in session 3. Have a good elevator pitch. Now, you guys have been to a large company where they have in their reception area, they have a little coffee table, right? And you see they've got a book about the company on their coffee table. They obviously have a large flash company with lots of money to put a book about their company on that coffee table. And in that book, they have a cool, nicely designed front cover. Says, you know, just on the face of it, what they do. And then inside they got, here's our founding, you know, or some dude's dad founded it in the 50s, and then they built it up, and then we spread out throughout the country, and then we do all this kind of stuff, and here's our latest projects. Lots of people think their elevator pitch is all of that stuff in that book. It is not. It's what's on the front cover. The purpose of an elevator pitch is to get people to engage in a conversation. It's not to tell, "Oh, we started 6 years ago, we started with this little truck, and then we've grown, and then now we're in 4 different locations, and we've got six trucks on the road, and we've got 18 staff, and we do these kinds of projects, and we're currently..." No. That's further down the conversation. People think they need to jam in as much as possible in that first 30 seconds. But no, the purpose of an elevator pitch, sorry, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in session 3. Purpose of elevator pitch is just to invite people into a discussion so you can talk more. It's not to tell your life story. And find a trusted mentor who can help with your business growth. Now, I'm going to talk about panels and stuff, gets, and a little bit about what support is available. But I'd like to, perhaps you could put it in the chat. Perhaps you put it in the chat. Any ideas you have for methods we can connect you with buyers, methods you've noticed that have worked, methods you've noticed that haven't worked. You put in the chat, and we could have a little look at that. Gail, can you keep an eye on the chat for us?
Well, Jared, we're fine. We're good.
Okay. I'll carry on it. All right, I'll talk a little bit about panels and gets. Now, some of you may be familiar with panels and gets, but I'll talk about it because not everyone will be. A panel is basically a list of potential providers, like preferred providers. So someone like, say, a council or a government agency, typically, but even sometimes the large companies have these, will get people to apply, and it's basically a tender. It's very, very similar to a tender, the documents you provide. They get people to apply, and then they select from all the people who apply, and they'll say, for the next 2 years, all of our work in this category will go to these 6 companies, or whatever number they come up with. It might be 2, it might be 8, it might be 15. But they'll say, everybody on this panel, all of the work in this category will go to all of the people on this panel, and everybody else is excluded. And sometimes, sometimes they might run for a year, they might run for 2 years, might run for 3 years, which means if you come along and you're not on the panel and you want to work with them, they'll go, you have to wait for the panel to open up. So, it's basically a preferred supplier agreement. But then what they'll do is when they have a job come up, they'll go to the panel and they'll all get to, tender for. Everyone on that panel has the opportunity for tender for that job as it comes along, and everybody not on the panel does not. Sometimes an organization like a government agency might want to work with you, and you want to work with them, obviously. And they might, oh, you're not on the panel. Oh, no. Now, again, Amotai is talking to people with panels about this stuff and going, well, it's your panel. Why can't you put people on it? Why do you have to wait 2 years? And trying to get them to be somewhat flexible about panels. So how you would get on one is you'd need to know when they open up. And they'll say, we're opening up, and now in Auckland, they just opened up the creative panel for design and photography and stuff, and get to apply. So you need to know when it's opening up, and then you need to basically fill out a tender to apply to be on the panel. That's how you do it. It's not a guarantee of work, but it does mean that every time something comes up in that area, you do get to compete for it. Now, to talk a little bit about GETS. Again, lots of you may be familiar with GETS, but some of you may not. GETS is the Government Electronic Tender System. Basically, any contract over a particular value, a government agency, due to their procurement rules, has to put it out to the public for the public to compete for. So that is the rule. You can't just get somebody to do it, you have to go out to the public and say, hey, we've got this job on, can you guys apply? Now, the people that win these jobs are people who know the client and are already in discussions with them about stuff they've got coming up. That's what happens most, is that they already have a relationship with whoever it is. You know, MOE is building some classrooms or whatever. You know, they already have a relationship with the decision makers, the project managers, or whoever it is that's actually allocating the work. They're dealing with them regularly, and they go, hey, you know, we got this this build coming up, the hall for you know, Stanmore Bay Primary or whatever it is. I made that up. When's that coming up? Oh, next year. Yeah, cool. So the people who win that work are already in those discussions with the people allocating the work, and they know it's coming up, and they'll go, oh, the tender's going to be released shortly. Cool. When's that? Oh, a couple of weeks. Awesome. And then it appears in their Gets inbox, and then most people are pretty good about it. They need to stop talking about that whilst the tender is live, but right up until the point it gets released, they'll have all sorts of discussions about it. So that is probably the thing you need to watch out for. Stuff arriving in your inbox with jobs can be a complete waste of your time if you're not in the in club. So you're way, way, way better off getting in the in club first and then signing up to Gets. Now, the way that it does work is that you go in, you log into Gets, you'll need a real me identification, and you tell Gets what type of work you do, and then when tenders come up in that area, in those categories, it sends you an email and say, this one's been released, this one's been released, and whenever they come up, you get a notification. So again, that sounds real cool, but if you're not in the in club, it can be a complete waste of your time. So I'll talk a little bit about the support that's available. Now, I'm going to reiterate what I said at the beginning. Thought I'd put it in here twice. So this is a series. We're working Auckland Unlimited through their Activate Tāmaki Makaurau program has allocated funding to support this series. This is number 1 of 5 in a series with our partners Whāraki. And number 2 is tenders and proposals. And that's, we're running these weekly for 5 weeks. Same time, same day, different topic for 5 weeks. So next week, same day, same time, tenders and proposals. Following week, same day, same time. Communications, how to influence the way that people see you, basically how to present. Then the following week, costing and pricing for profit. Real tricky. A big part of being competitive is making sure you got your costing and pricing right, just to cover yourself from a risk point of view and to get a really good quality price out there so you can be competitive, you're not blown out of the water. And then topic 5, health and safety, having all your health and safety paperwork in order. So also what I said at the beginning was you have to register for each event. Each event has an event page on Eventbrite. You would have come into this event from Eventbrite, and on that first page, all the other links to all the other topics are on that page. But then I put all the links to all the topics on each page. So every single page has all the links on. So it doesn't really matter where you come in, you'll be able to find the link and register for each of these events at your leisure. Now, this is just some really common support mechanisms. Te Puni Kōkiri, you can go onto their website and find some business support there. Pacific Business Trusts, so this TPK, sorry, Te Puni Kōkiri is for Māori suppliers. Pacific Business Trust is for Pacifica suppliers. They have a really good quality programs available. Māori Women's Development Incorporation, MWDI, is for Māori women, and they support Māori women in business. Regional business partners, that one is usually run by an economic development agency in your area, and they do some business support. Pautama Trust supports Māori businesses. Pākihi is a online business course. There are 3 topics, quite entry level, but if you're new to business ideas and new to business thinking, then Pākihi is a really good starter course. And Te Wānanga Aotearoa runs business courses, free business courses throughout the country as well. Both online, but I'm not too sure if they're in person in all areas, particularly with the COVIDs and things like that. I'd like to acknowledge our partners, mihi atu ki a kōrua, so Activate Tāmaki Makaurau from Auckland Unlimited and Whāriki. I'd like to acknowledge their support in putting this together. Tēnā tātou te whānau, that's us. I'll just pause and we'll take questions, I think, or see how we go. Cool. So in the chat, we've got someone, what's worked for me is turning up for networking events and staff introducing me to people. Yep, we're keen to do that as often as we can. Yeah, someone else. Getting involved in the Amotai LinkedIn profile. Cool. Kia ora, Neria. Yes, we will make the recording of this session available on our YouTube channel. A question from the chat. Do you think networking is the only way to be in with the organisations on GETS? I think, so the point I was making with the whole GETS thing is that your chances of winning tend to go massively up if you know the organisation. So you have to have a relationship with them of some kind. If you're coming out of the blue, and if you were to sign up to GETS tonight, right, in whatever category it is, whether it's civils work or graphic design or whatever, you'll start receiving emails immediately for jobs coming through. But the point I'm making there is that if you rock up out of the blue and just apply, it could be a complete waste of your time. And obviously having a relationship with the organization, sending the tender out is way, way, way better than just popping up out of the blue and going, hi, I replied to your tender. So is networking the only way? No. But definitely talking to them beforehand is a really, really good way. But of course, that takes time. That's why you need to be focused. That's why you can't kind of try and target everyone. Being knowledgeable about buyers, who they are and what they do, helps you to focus. And then you can spend your time actually talking to people. And then you get into these discussions about what work's coming up, and then the tender comes out and then you apply. I think that's the way I'm thinking about it. Twenty, I'm not too sure. I've got your question there. What are the top 3 questions Amotai ask new suppliers that they engage with when looking for partners? Oh, when we're working with suppliers? Ooh.
When you're working with suppliers, what do you ask? Like, how do you engage them to be part or take part of the or participate with Amotai?
If we're using them as a provider, like we use photographers and designers, and for this thing, we're using presenters. The same for any buying situation, really. You're looking to know that they have the experience and knowledge and skill to do what it is you want them to do, and obviously some sort of track record helps. Sometimes we're looking to take someone who's pretty good at what they do and develop them with our expenditure, meaning that you don't necessarily always want to be using the top dog. And it's true that in some instances I've gone, yeah, well, this person's really, really, really good at what they do. Fine. This person is pretty good at what they do, but if we were to work with them on this project, then we could take them to the next level. And so that's sometimes what we're trying to achieve. And sometimes our buyers are trying to do that as well. They can recognize, and we work with them on this. We say, well, look, can you use such and such this time? Get them to get a good track record, help develop them and bring them up to speed of some of your other providers. So to answer your question, I don't know about top 3 questions. We're probably just looking for expertise, experience, track record. It helps if you're already in the council system, but it's not compulsory. It's not that much of a mission getting people onto our system, but it's always easier if they're already on.
Halfway. Thank you very much. Namahi.
Shut up. And things like timing, if they're what their timing's like. Chevy's asked the names of free business courses. Can we look at Pākehī, make sure that's still going? It was not too long ago. I should have.
I've just put that up there, Jared, onto the chat box. It's still going.
Cool. Pākehī.nz. Free online short course. Yeah, cool. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Namahi. Pākehī.nz. Oh, kia ora, Lisa. So Lisa, who's put the Pākehī.nz up there for us, which I should have looked up earlier. Thanks, Lisa. Is going to do our costing and pricing. And that's topic 4. Topic 4. Lisa's a chartered accountant, tons of experience working with businesses like Amotai suppliers, and can help you with thinking about making sure you get your costing and pricing right. Yeah, Pākehī is entry level. I'll describe it as entry level, in that it's not like heavy duty, like degree level business course. So it's really good if you're just want a little bit of an upgrade in what you currently know, or a little bit of insight into operating a business. It's been going for a while now. Oh, and sorry, another bit to the comment there. Watch out for MWDI's Hine Boss program. Cool. Namahi, Lise. Cool. And so Oka Business provides free programs for wahine Māori business owners. So they can email Lisa at okabusiness.com. It's in the chat.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Jared?
Welcome, yeah, for sure.
DJ? Yeah. I just had a look on Amotai itself under my business, and yeah, you don't really see much until you go into it. So I was just wondering, because there's a lot there that could help out a lot of the guys that are on here today in regards to being able to help source their products they need for their drainage, civil works, all their machinery, getting far better pricing. But it's just that initially when you look at Collab NZ, there's nothing sort of really to want for anyone to sort of click on it. That's all.
You mean the profile?
Yeah, just that profile when you go into it.
The profile portion should have a bunch of top quality content you've put in there.
So we've got.
You mean the face of it, the first view?
Yeah, just the first view when you're scrolling through.
Yeah,
All the companies.
it would be cool if when you open a company that the first thing you see is that a really good quality profile, eh?
Yeah, rather than just
Rather than have to click through it. Is that what you
yeah. That's all.
Cool. I'll make a note of that. It's a good point because I've kind of noticed that too. You open up a company and it's got stuff like, their business number and stuff. Tell us a bit about the company first, and then we'll go from there. There should be like categories in it and a little spiel. In a paragraph, and then you can dig into
exactly
all the stuff you want. Because the least interesting stuff about you is your business number, or
that's what you can offer people.
Yeah,
offer businesses.
I'll talk to our crew about that. Good point. Thank you. Yeah, I have noticed that we do the stuff that we kind of accuse buyers of doing. And don't get me wrong, our buyers, heaps of them are like real hardcore, staunch supporters of ours. And they're working as hard as they can to make this connection piece work. But by the same token, you know that, if you've been working with such and such a company for 10 years or whatever, it is heaps harder to change.
Yeah.
And I had
but if that price is right.
yeah. Well, I had the same thing putting this thing together. I worked with another provider previously and brought in a new provider, and it's not mega bucks we're talking about, but I was nervous. This is my reputation. If this person doesn't do a good job, I look stupid. So changing to someone new.
Oh, definitely.
Was nervous for me, but I thought I'd put my money where my mouth is and make sure I use Amotai suppliers as much as I could. And I don't think, and I'm not criticizing anyone in particular. I don't know that we do that enough. That we don't put our money where our mouth is and start at, I'll use Amotai as much as I can, and then when I can't find an Amotai provider, I'll use outside. And like I said, we've got tons of really top quality companies, but it's a perfect. They're not. Those people doing that aren't bad people. They're just people.
Yeah, exactly.
If you
when you go in and do cold calling and you're like, oh, I can offer you this, they're sort of hesitant, and then you're giving them samples and a full trial and compare it with another one that they're using there, an opposition one for a dust sort of sweeper or a scrubbing machine, and because they got to get replaced quite regularly, so they can actually work out how long the filtration will last. There's all these little things that you can look at.
There is
quality.
So I don't hold it against buyers that stick with their current suppliers, but we do try and just encourage and be on the side, and we can support
keep them honest. Keep them honest.
And they are, like I said, lots of our buyers are really staunch supporters of supply diversity, Amotai, and our suppliers. They're super keen on it. But like I said, right at the beginning, the path to success is quite complex, and that's why it's such a big job, kind of identifying and resolving all the issues.
For sure.
But we're collecting one relationship at a time. Just one foot in front of the other. Not trying to solve all the world's problems in a day.
Cool. Cheers.
just on that point, one of our staunchest supporters is tracking how much they spend with Amotai businesses, and they reached 1% of their revenue. They spend with them. And that's one of our staunchest. So it's not enthusiasm that's the lack of. And we're constantly racking our brains, the two of us. How do we make this smoother? How do we make more connections and better connections? You know, we're doing that constantly, all day, every day. So there is the complexity, and it is the complexity as opposed to the enthusiasm. That's the issue, and we're racking our brains constantly trying to make it better.
Hey, Jared, Jared, sorry
sorry.
there, DJ.
No, sorry.
I was just asking about, you know, accountability with the council, accountability with the government agencies in terms of the 5% procurement. How is that monitored? How is that tracked to ensure that there is that? I mean, and I understand it's based on volume as opposed to value of contracts, which means that, you know, you're looking at I suppose a bit of a different kettle of fish there. So yeah, just wanted to get an idea there.
Sure, there is a mishmash of measurement methods. So like I said, Auckland Council started the mahi, and it took them, you know, 1.5 years, 2 years just to put a measurement thing in place. And they measure, Auckland Council measures by value, by percentage of addressable spend. So what they mean is, you know, if we're paying rent for a building, you can't include that in that expenditure in terms of addressable spend. But if we're buying someone that changes the lights, someone that cleans the building, someone that mows the lawn, someone that builds something, then that's addressable spend, and we'll track 5% of that. So it's 5% of addressable spend for Auckland Council. When the government put their 5% target in place, they went with 5% of the number of contracts. Now, in terms of anytime you're measuring something, every time you add a piece, there's a cost to it. Measurement, gathering information is not free. There's a cost to it, and counting the number of contracts is way easier than measuring revenue. So, you know, you can kind of see where they're coming from, but by the same token, in my personal and humble opinion, not criticizing anyone, I think measuring percentage of addressable spend is a better way of measuring it, because not all contracts are created equal, and it's too easy to. I don't think people would invent small contracts and go, bam, we put out, you know, 50 contracts this month for $100 each. I don't think anyone would go to that extent to waste their own time and just manufacture small contracts out of nowhere to get their stats up. But by the same token, it is that, you know, you would start concentrating on the easier contracts to allocate, and then that means that you're excluded from, you know, the smaller ones are the first cab off the rank, and then the larger ones are, you know, much harder to allocate. You know, you're not pushing them anywhere near as hard. So that's the downside to using number of contracts instead of addressable spend. And the staunch supporter, I'm not naming names because I don't want to talk about people who aren't here. One of our buyers who's a staunch supporter took them ages to put a measurement piece in place, and they're at 1%. And they're trying as hard as they can, you know. So, but they're working on percentage that they spend with subbies. So that's their measure, which is a pretty legit way of measuring it. So they're not including money they spent on their own staff, their own rent.
That's the building industry. Then they're in. So then the building industry, that's there.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
Yep. But that's when you think about it. They're excluding money they spent on rent, vehicles, their own staff, which means that if they got to 5%, it would be way more money, because they're getting 5% of, say, their money they spend with subbies. That's more than 5% of their overall spend in total. Oh, hang on. No, my math is in reverse. Ignore me, it's late.
It's after 5.
Does Amotai get notified of future procurement opportunities from either buyers or the council? I know in GETS they provide future procurement opportunities, what's coming up, but do any of your buyers, or does the council have a process of notifying future procurement opportunities?
Yes, and buyers come to us and say, we're doing such and such, can you send us everybody in this category? And then we match it up from the database and send it to them. By the same token, when the council released their design panel, they asked us to tell them all of our design businesses, and we matched that up, and then they communicated to as many people as humanly possible that the design panel is coming up and can you get at it? So yes, the answer is yes.
Does Amotai provide support services for businesses that are wanting to apply for tenders, where they might want to get some support and help on putting it together?
If we did, we would refer people to a program or an organisation that did that. We wouldn't do it ourselves. We wouldn't have the capacity to walk alongside someone to put a tender together. At the moment, there isn't a real obvious funding source for that. I mean, you could use Pacifica businesses could go to Pacific Business Trust for that. TPK may be able to help with that. Te Puni Kokiri may be able to help with that. So yeah, we refer, if someone says, hey, I need a hand with this, we can refer people to programs and people that support, but we definitely don't do it ourselves. The actual sitting with you and helping you with the tender.
Kia ora.
Kia ora, Jared. It's Andrea Ronganui here from Go Media.
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Hey, so just to follow on from that last question that Lisa said, or the comment around, we currently supply advertising to Auckland Council, and I've been trying to track the person down to so that they can put it next to their stats around their well, what we were saying before, to quantify what they're spending. Are you able to pass the details on for that person to me?
Now, kia ora, Andrea.
Kia
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
When you go into the council system, if you're an Amotai business, you're allowed to identify yourself as such, and then any expenditure with you gets recorded on their stats.
Right. Okay. So does that happen automatically? Because I actually, the person who's registered on Auckland Council, I did this a wee while ago, so I can't remember the lady's name. But I did email her to say, hey, look, you guys are currently spending with us. She, and like kind of what I'm hearing through the webinar today, it was tricky because she kind of palmed me off to somebody else. And then that person came back and he thought that I was more trying to, you know, apply for that one, that procurement that's coming up, the design.
The panel.
Yeah. And I said to her, no, that's not, you guys are already spending with us. I just want to be able to communicate with someone so that you can take the money that you are spending with us and put it towards these stats that you're collating. And they weren't quite sure. And then he never got back to me. So that was probably 2 weeks ago.
Who were you talking to? Do you know? Was it?
It was
Chris? Hone?
No, it was I think it was I don't know, I have to bring it up. He was.
Kia ora, Andrea. It's Gail here from Amotai.
Oh, kia ora.
Kia ora. So I look after all the procurement for our team. So if you would like to forward me your email, through to kiora@amotai.nz, then I'll be able to pick that up and follow through.
Okay, cool.
Awesome.
Thank you. That's what I was just wondering, because I think we already do provide stuff to Auckland Council, and I suppose I felt like there's so many different points of contact there, because each different department from our point of view, they have different advertising budgets, and a lot of their stuff already comes through an advertising agency, but even that spend, that sometimes that we will get through MBM, who are their contracted advertising agency, it would be hidden under them, so they won't even know that that money that they're booking through MBM is in fact money that's coming towards us, an Amotai registered business. So that's kind of like where I got to with council, because I was like, hey, look, you know, you guys are doing a great job and we're here, you are spending with us, and I just, you know, want to wave my hand up and say, you know, we are here. And obviously too, from my point of view, I feel like if they know that we are here and that is actually happening, they're going to encourage more departments within council, because their I suppose, what do you call it, their KPIs are met when they can record the information, like the spend that they're doing with the Amotai registered businesses. But they didn't quite get which angle I was coming from. So they thought that, oh, you want to apply for the advertising procurement that's coming up. I was like, no, you're already spending with us. So yeah, Gail, I will, I'll definitely flick you an email. And yeah, I can let you know even through their advertising agency what they've been spending with us. Because I feel like once I kind of get that through to them and shine the light on it, I feel like they might start doing a little bit more with us.
Yeah, that'll be awesome.
Yeah, cool.
And just to tie it back to our broader discussion, that happens quite a bit. That kind of order has a job, they give it to such and such company, and then that such and such company is subbing it to some of it, a portion of it, to Amotai businesses, and they want to be able to record that on their stats, the company itself. But they've got a setup there with kind of order where will say, hey, you need to spend X amount of this contract that we're giving you with Amotai businesses, and then they actually actively record it. So I think putting that mechanism in place or pointing that out to the council would only make our argument stronger and make it easier for people to use Amotai businesses. So anytime our whānau are coming across that, just bear that in mind, that people being able to record it on their stats is important, because it only encourages them to play the game further. So
yeah,
just
totally.
bear that in mind.
Yeah, and then they see how easy it is to actually interact with us, I think. So that's also what I was thinking. I was kind of like, you know, I was hearing the questions before and just the troubles of getting through those hoops. And I think sometimes we have to be like, that was to the particular contact that I had, it took 4 emails before he finally understood and stopped trying to put me off. But now that I've got your number, Gail, I'll be hitting you up, and then we can go in there and hopefully they'll start recording it. And then, like, for everyone else that's listening, same type of thing. Yeah, cool. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Yeah, and again, nice to meet you. I might wrap it up. Some of the whānau have dropped off. The presentation's finished. Might wrap it up. I might get one of our crew, if they're still on, give us exiting karakia. Stu, I can see you there. You wanna jump in and give us a closing karakia?
Sure. Kia ora whānau. Lovely day. And thanks for the presentation, Jared. Awesome. Thank you, whānau, for your participation. I'm just going to give our karakia in English, if it's okay. Our dear Heavenly Fathers, we give thanks and gratitude for the wonderful presentation and our wider whānau tonight. Bless them and their endeavours to do better in their worlds and the opportunities that avail them, as we invite thy Spirit to be with us, that we may get through these COVID challenging times also. The health and well-being of our whānau may be first and foremost. We pray for strength and energy and give thanks and gratitude for this wonderful night, and pray for well-being for all of us. And we do so in the sacred name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Kia ora whānau, thank you for coming, and I'll see you next week at the tenders and proposals. Sign up. You have to register. Sign up on the event page. I'll see you next week.
Ka kite whānau.
Always on. Best be ready for the time of your life. Cruising down the highway 35.